Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining me here today in this live webinar on dietary and herbal treatments for IBS. Now, we're going to include other versions of inflammatory colon conditions because that's what we're talking about here. We can move away from the medical terms. We're talking about inflammatory colon conditions. So there's different degrees. So you could have a mild degree and just have a little loose stool or a little diarrhea or a little abdominal pain. You could have more severe where you can a lot of diarrhea. You can have more, so it could be irritable bowel syndrome, irritable bowel disease. And of course, if it progresses and it ulcerates the colon, and then you have ulcerative colitis. But they're basically in the same category of inflammation in the colon. That destroys the mucosal barrier or lining inside the colon. Not so much the small intestines, but the large intestines. But it can be throughout the whole GI tract. In fact, you can even sometimes see mouth sores on a person who has ulcerative colitis. So and hemorrhoids. So it's this different ends of the same digestive tract from the lips to the rectum. So you can see mouth sores, you can see hemorrhoids, bleeding there, and then at the same time they have, ulcerative colitis or irritable bowel disease. But that's what we're talking about. And of course, a lot of people, they don't not diagnosed early on because early on you just get little loose stools, maybe a little pain, you don't think much about it. And then it just keeps on progressing. So we're going to cover the causes, which is really the most important thing because you are causing it. It's not like some condition you inherit. It's not a genetic condition. So you did it. You caused it. Often unknowingly. It's not like diabetes where, we know what you did to cause that. You had a lot of cookies and ice cream. And then we're going to talk about, things that make it worse. There's certain foods and habits that make the condition worse, even though they're not really a cause. And then in Ayurveda, of course, Ayurveda is a very sophisticated system. We have a lot of variations. We got a lot of types of every condition. It's just the way Ayurveda is. They have, a Pitta type, a Kapha type, a Vata type, a Pitta Vata type. So there's always these different types in Ayurveda. And this, of course, what really makes it difficult for the, let's just say, allopathic linear mind to grasp it because, most people have this type of linear mindset, particularly my gender, where they're just thinking, okay, I have this disease, I have inflammation in the colon. What herb should I take? That's kind of that non-holistic linear perspective, trying to match a treatment up with a condition. And you can't do that because one, you have to treat everybody holistically. There's all kinds of other conditions that may be going on that are affecting this condition, including just stress, for example, which makes this condition worse. Habits, eating habits make it worse. And also, of course, what I'm getting at here is there's many types of every condition. So we can't just come to the conclusion that even when you're speaking to me, somebody who's treated lots of cases of IBS, you can't really just say, okay, this is how I treated it, because there are, once again, I'll repeat, different types. And we're going to talk about the two major types. And then there's the Vata type, where it's like a little loose stool and maybe constipation, and the Pitta type, where there's a lot of diarrhea. And then, of course, we're going to talk about the degree, how it progresses, So this is what is also very important, because even when you're treating the person, it's getting better. So the degree is lessening. Now, you may have been diagnosed with IBS 5 years ago, but it could have been much worse today. And then if you start treatment with somebody like myself who knows how to treat it and reverse it, in a month, you don't have the same conditions you had a month earlier. So the condition is always moving. So the herbs, the treatment, the diet has to keep changing. So this is, I think, one reason people are not able to treat it on their own, because they have this mindset, what do I take for it? But in fact, like I said, there's at least 3 types, and there's many degrees. So that makes many variations that, you know, would have to be considered to properly treat it. We can see some testimonials here. You can see on my website, kabirsclinic.com, under testimonials, colon-related testimonials. And at one time, you know, these testimonials were all full of, you know, talking about constipation, but now they've gotten filled with IBS-related testimonials. And here's a person, this is quite recent. She says, amazed, I was a bit skeptical because my reasons for reaching out were for her extremely dry lips. But when I did an appointment with her, I found out she had IBS, and I treated her IBS. And guess what? Her lips improved, and the moisture came back to her lips. Isn't that amazing? And she just gave me that testimonial. And here is another one. Also this year, I get a couple case a month of IBS, and it takes them often 6 months to recover. But this person is saying, okay, I resolved it in a couple weeks. More than likely, I didn't resolve it. I had managed it in a couple weeks. So this person says, I've been working with Kabir for a few months, had digestive issues, and kind of gotten worse over 20 years, weight loss, other symptoms, and went to a lot of specialists. Nobody zeroed in what was wrong. She was malnourished, you know, and after the first appointment, she realized that she was making it worse, and she got better quite quick. She probably just got it under control. That's often a misconception, even for my own patients. When I stop the diarrhea and the pain, they think they are cured when all I've done is manage it. When there are few stages to treatment. That's another important point. There are at least 3 stages. First is manage it so you're not having diarrhea and pain. And 2 is kind of heal it. And 3 is, you know, take some preventive herbs to make sure it doesn't come back. Okay, here's another one. You can see how my colon-related testimonial section has been taken over by IBS testimonials. And here we go. You know, no longer spending hours in the morning with IBS symptoms. She said it was quite debilitating. She highly recommends Ayurvedic approach to IBS. That's right. That's what we're talking about, Ayurveda here. Okay, this person says she got better in 3 days. Again, it's more like I managed it. Here's somebody, they didn't call it IBS, but constipation and bleeding. See, that was a different type. Here, a person had diarrhea. This one, okay, here's a medical doctor who had ulcerative colitis, and he says, I resolved it in 2 or 3 days. Again, I didn't resolve it. If you go on to I just managed it in a few days quickly. And this man, he talks about he was on prednisone. This is a medical doctor. He put his name down here. His actual testimonial was longer. I had to hack it down a little bit. But he said he tells the whole story. That he was on prednisone, and he was wanted to get off of prednisone. He was on the specific carbohydrate diet, which is useless, really. It doesn't help. He had bloody diarrhea. It was a quite serious case. And then the doctor wanted him to go on Remicade. And being a medical doctor, he was fully aware of the horrendous side effects of Remicade. So he refused to go on it. And that's when he discovered me. Then he tells the whole story, how I resolved it. And pretty much he mentions it did take a few months. So you can see there my success rate has been quite good. And these treatments are effective. And we can thank Ayurveda and my teacher in India who taught me how to treat the condition. So now I'm going to teach you. So let's talk about the causes, first of all, because cause is really the most important subject. The first line of treatment in Ayurveda is always remove the cause. And most people who have IBS have not removed the cause. Of course, the medical doctors will try to give you antibiotics, and they do colonoscopies. Now, both of those things, colonoscopy is very evasive method. They want to sometimes look for polyps, but in this case, if you have an inflamed colon, they want some nice photos of it to see how inflamed it is. But unfortunately, the process itself makes the colon much worse, colonoscopy. So I've seen people pretty much recover, and then they want to do a colonoscopy to make sure they were fine, even though they had no more pain, diarrhea, and symptoms, but they did the colonoscopy, and then the whole condition came back. So that obviously makes it harder for the medical world to treat it when they want to do colonoscopies all the time to keep an eye on it. And then the other major cause is antibiotic use. In fact, when I have cases of children with IBS, it's definitely they had a lot of colds and flus, and the parents were just, maybe medical doctors and just giving them antibiotics. So particularly when you have a young child with inflammatory colon condition, generally it's the free use of antibiotics. Or some people would say the overuse, but any use of antibiotics. I don't really think as an herbalist antibiotics are even necessary. I can treat all bacterial infections, even in young children, without using antibiotics, and any good herbalist can. So there's really no need for this. And a lot of new research has come out about the antibiotics, doing far more damage and just not just killing the unhealthy bacteria, but killing your healthy bacteria, which is what's protecting your intestinal lining, which is making up your, mucosal lining or barrier, is the healthy bacteria. And that's why people try to take probiotics. But when the mucosal bacteria, the mucosa has been destroyed, there's nowhere for the healthy bacteria to live. And of course, antibiotic use has destroyed your healthy bacteria, your unhealthy bacteria. And now a lot of research has come out saying it's just destroying cells in your intestinal lining. So it's really, I would say, the major cause of inflammatory colon condition is the use of antibiotics. Just like recurring urinary tract infections, the cause is the antibiotics. So, there are other causes, but that's usually one of the factors. I would say for most people, there's multiple causes. So you have a combination, but one is antibiotics. So you usually got antibiotics plus some of the following. Raw food diet. That's right. Particularly a raw cabbage and kale. I've had young people in their 20s with inflammatory colon conditions, loose stools, alternating loose, constipated, pain, abdominal pain, not really severe inflammatory colon condition, but pretty bad that they were getting, loose stools. And it was due to smoothies. There's a lot of problem with smoothies. One, there's usually terrible food combining. Two, they're cold. And three, in this case, it was the raw kale. So if anybody's had irritable bowel or inflammatory colon condition, and you go try to have some raw cabbage or kale or some kale juice, you're going to feel a lot of pain. And at minimum, you're going to have a lot of bloating and gas. So, we know that it's rough. In Ayurveda, it's, we call it roughage. It's just so rough that these, even just raw vegetables, just a lot of raw vegetables, but particularly the cabbage family, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, kale, and Brussels sprouts, they just kind of scrub away all your intestinal mucosa. Now, it's, maybe there's antibiotic use in there as well. And also low-fat diet, no dairy is also a problem. So people make a lot of mistakes when they start to get this condition because, they don't know. They're just guessing, and they're on social media just watching stuff, guessing away. And most of my patients, when they come to me, have eliminated a lot. Mostly they've over-eliminated because they don't know what to eliminate. And most people panic and they take out wheat, which sometimes isn't even really necessary. The raw vegetables is, which they don't get. And the other thing they remove is dairy. And in fact, ghee and even butter will make the condition worse because you're mucosa. You're trying to build up mucosa in your intestinal lining. What builds mucosa better than anything is dairy. Excuse me. So leaving a low-fat diet, no fat, no dairy, because I have to put everybody on ghee because I'm trying to build up the mucosa lining. So you do a low-fat diet, doing a lot of raw vegetables. Maybe you did some antibiotics when you're young. These can, combine to make the problem. Now, another thing that causes it, and I get a lot of Indians and Pakistanis and even South Americans with inflammatory colon conditions due to the hot spices. That's right, chili pepper. Now, most people with irritable bowel figured out that the chili pepper makes it worse. Most people get that. They're off the chili pepper by the time they met me because they've discovered it hurts, it bleeds, it's painful. But it could even be hot foods. Even just ginger can make it worse in some cases. It depends on the degree. So, people having a lot of hot spices, low-fat diet, antibiotic use, you can see the combination of ingredients necessary to make this. And it happens slowly over time. I mean, everybody always says, but I've been having smoothies for 5 years. Well, it didn't bother me before. Well, that's right. But if you only would have had it for a month, it probably wouldn't have had the problem. It's because you did it for a month, 5 years. Same with spicy food. They always say, but I've been eating spicy food my whole life. Well, that's right. I mean, those hot spices, they they burn fat. So we give hot chili pepper to, obese people, kapha types. And kapha type is usually big and heavy and excess body fat. And they don't get IBS because they've got nice, thick, intestinal linings and plenty of fat protecting it, because fat is a protective substance, just like our body is covered in skin, and part of that is fat. And when the skin gets too thin, which is a common sign you see of people on low-fat diet, their skin is paper thin, and you can see their veins and see their bones. It should be smooth like that. And that means they're on a low-fat diet. People often think they're having enough fat, but it doesn't really matter what the patient thinks. From my point of view, I can do my own diagnosis, and I can just have them hold up their fist and know they're on a low-fat diet. So if you got thin skin, you've got thin mucosa lining, and you're not consuming enough fat and oil in your diet. And olive oil really isn't the best oil for building up this tissue. So that can be a problem. And now next, things that really make it worse is coffee. Oh my God. Now you have to imagine the condition to understand how to treat it. It's really quite simple once you get it. It's just that people get confused with these terms, irritable bowel disease, and it's all confusing. And, they're Googling it, and they're just, and these people they're researching are either just people who had it themselves, and they think now they're going to tell everybody to do the same as them, when they don't even know there's different types, there's different stages. So that will send people astray. And then, of course, if you look online, it's just a disaster. But coffee is, you have back to imagining the condition. I always tell people, imagine it's raw, like you had a carpet burn. You slid off your Harley and you slid down the road a little bit on your arm, or you fell on the carpet and you got this big red pink patch on your arm or your elbow. It's raw. It's not like bleeding. Otherwise it'd be ulcerative, but it's raw. It's very sensitive when you touch it. And now you can think, what could I put on this raw? Almost like a burn. It's just pink and raw and red and super sensitive. And that's what happens to the inside of your colon. And when you get a colonoscopy, you get these nice photos of this red, raw, inflamed colon. Even though, like I said, the colonoscopy will make it even more inflamed and more worse. But hey, you got those nice photos. And that just proves that you have a raw tissue, exposed, raw, just like the skin is worn off, and now everything touching it bothers it. So coffee is going to make it worse. Spices are going to hurt. But again, you put butter on it, it's going to feel good. If you pour coffee on it, it's going to hurt. If you put vinegar on it, it's going to hurt. If you put lemon juice on it, it's going to hurt. Again, if you put butter on it, it's going to feel good. See what I mean? You're trying to coat and protect this raw, inflamed space inside of your colon, usually on the descending colon. So even the other thing that has to be eliminated in this diet is nightshades, tomato sauce. We often call them the acidic foods. So sometimes a lot of people with IBS, they also have heartburn and acid reflux. So you have to, again, get them off the hot spices, get them off of the nightshades, acidic foods, get them off of even sour things. Some people have got this condition by having too much apple cider vinegar, because you have to think, what vinegar, imagine vinegar, coffee, lemon juice, they all have like a cleaning property. I have this cleaning substance I use to clean the floors, or not me personally, but the cleaning staff. I take credit, but I buy this lemon peel cleaning formula, and you put it in the water and the whole room smells like lemon peels. But this lemon really cuts the grease. It cuts the fat. Chili pepper also destroys fat. So it's the sour foods and hot foods that have to go. You want sweet and soothing foods. So start to give you an idea where we're going with the diet. But let me continue. Other things that can make this worse, of course, is poor food combining. That's where the smoothie gets you again, because you can't mix fruit and vegetables together. There's all types of bad food combining. Hippocrates talks about it. Ayurveda talks about it. Chinese medicine talks about it. I mean, I think they should teach you food combining in school, because nobody seems to know it, and it's just common ancient knowledge. Don't mix fruit and vegetables together. Don't have milk and dairy together, dairy and fruit together. That's a really terrible food combining, and people are doing that all the time. But these food combining choices, see, they can create the unhealthy bacteria. And, people get candida, yeast, SIBO, yeast overgrowth from bad food combining, usually combined with cold foods, cold drink. Another reason why a smoothie can be such a disaster. You've got that raw kale in there just ripping up your colon. You've got bad food combining, creating unhealthy bacteria, fermenting, creating bloating and gas. And then you have cold, and cold is aggravating the whole condition and making this environment for the unhealthy bacteria. So other things that can make this condition worse, skipping meals. And just so happens, at least at this time of this recording, intermediate fasting is a big fad right now. We're moving away from the mushroom fad, and we're in the intermediate fasting is a cure for everything fad. But not to say that fasting doesn't have value, but it makes this condition worse. Skipping meals, fasting, not eating, all makes the condition worse, because when you have something that's nice and a soothing in your intestinal lining, then it feels better and it allows it to heal. But when it's exposed to air, just like a burn, if you've ever had a bad burn, if it's in the air, it feels worse. If you put it under the water, the pain goes away. When you get it away from the oxygen, your colon's the same. When it's raw like that, if you had a big carpet burn on your arm, you're better off to put some, butter. We have certain healing ghee, we call it. It's like herbs inside of ghee that you put on wounds. I use it even for animals. And you cover that wound in this butter substance with the herbs in it, some of the herbs including neem to prevent infection. And then you wrap the whole thing up, and then you don't feel the pain because you're not exposing it to the air. But so that's why fasting, skipping meals makes it worse. Hot spices makes it worse. Chocolate, nightshades, coffee, raw vegetables, all these are just going to make it worse. So that's, somewhat covering the diet right there. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there's two main types, and we need to mention these two types. There are actually more than two types, but we can say generally there's two main types. One is the Vata type. And the Vata type has constipation and then diarrhea, constipation and then maybe loose stools. It's alternating. But the point about this person is their whole life, they generally had constipation. So these people, they put off treatment much longer because they think, wow, my bowels are finally moving. I mean, sometimes constipated, sometimes loose, but hey, at least I'm not constipated all the time like I was for my whole life. That's actually an early stage of irritable bowel. They're just not acknowledging it because it's not a big problem for them because they've had such a history of constipation. They don't really mind these occasional loose stools until the pain starts getting bad. Then you get more abdominal pain, and that's when they go in and do the colonoscopy, which kind of inflames the whole situation, and then they get the diagnosis. And then they go do a research, and they find out that they're just going to get a steroid, and then sometimes they take it, sometimes they don't. And then they do research about steroids, and then they want off the steroid. And that's usually when and then they spend another couple of years on social media and YouTube, where all these people look so convincing on YouTube. And they follow this, take vitamins, and actually a handful of vitamins can make it worse. I usually take out all the vitamins and minerals that people are taking. They're just going to aggravate the intestinal lining. There's some food-based vitamins you can add, like wheatgrass is very soothing, things like that are very nutritional. But basically, all these vitamin supplements, particularly taken on an empty stomach, a lot of these things that I mentioned will be much worse on an empty stomach. Like coffee, for example, I've had more than one case that they thought they were done. I think one of the testimonials I read who said, wow, he treated me in 3 days. Well, a week after she gave the testimonial, she went and had a cup of coffee in the morning, and the whole condition came back, and she was back in the ER, which, didn't do anything. And they just ended up coming back to me, and we had to start all over from scratch. So if you're having hot, spicy food on empty stomach, it's going to be worse. If you're having raw vegetables on empty stomach, it's going to be worse. If you have coffee on an empty stomach, it's going to be worse. And of course, if you're having low-fat diet and you have thin skin, and it's going to be more aggravated. So this condition is progressing along until it gets quite bad, and then people treat it. So that's the first type, is this alternating diarrhea. And that's the Vata type, we call it, because the person is generally thin, dry, and light. And there's some dryness involved here, dry skin, dry lips, dry stools, but you're getting the diarrhea in between. And then the other type is the Pitta type. Pitta, of course, means fire. It's more inflamed. This is a more painful condition that often leads to ulcerative colitis and bleeding. But this type of person will come to me with 5 to 10 loose stools and even diarrhea from day one. So that's a Pitta type. So there are completely different treatments for these two types. You have to know these two types. It's very important. And then, of course, there's stages. Stages is a little bit of loose stool, once in a while diarrhea. That's the beginning stage. Diarrhea all the time. It's obviously getting worse. Diarrhea and pain. That's getting worse. And then, diarrhea, pain, and bleeding. And more. And, you're up to 10 times a day of loose stools. That's the advanced stage. So you can be anywhere along the way. And as I'm treating it, you're actually coming back. You could start off with 10 loose stools. Now you could be down to, 7 or 8. Now you could be down to 3 or 4. So you're reversing it. We're reversing it by, what are we doing? We're healing the intestinal lining. Yeah, you have to throw in some probiotics, but the probiotics in themselves are not a treatment. Everybody who's come to me with IBS has already been taking the probiotics. But probiotics are like the healthy bacteria. It's like the good grass, the good rye grass, Bermuda grass in your yard. I got Bermuda grass in there, and I got weeds with thorns in there, both. And you really got to get the weeds and the thorns out first, and then you can throw in the Bermuda grass and start watering it and everything. So it's the same with this intestinal bacteria. If you've got you got to get rid of the unhealthy bacteria kind of first, and you have to make the home. We always say it's called like a prebiotic. The intestinal lining has to have mucosa, and that mucosa is the home of the bacteria. So if you don't have any mucosa lining, which is what advanced stage of irritable bowel disease is, your intestinal lining has been wiped off by some of these causes that I mentioned, then you can take all the probiotics you want, and they don't have a nice home to live in it. There's not a prebiotic there. So that's why people are now taking prebiotics. But often the little tiny capsule that says, oh, it's got prebiotics in it, little fiber, it's just not going to be enough. It's insufficient. I mean, you got to coat the entire intestinal lining to rebuild the mucosa. And every time you have a cup of coffee on an empty stomach, or a bunch of vinegar, or even raw garlic, raw onions, you're just wiping out all that intestinal mucosa, and you got to start back over again. And I will say that before we go on, is that I would just say every single one of my IBS cases, they follow not only this pattern of searching online, taking steroids from the doctor, then searching online and over eliminating. They're eliminating wheat, they're eliminating dairy, they're eliminating everything. So they're usually losing weight and going downhill by the time they come to me, because they've over eliminated, because they really don't know what to eliminate. All they know is they have pain. And that's why these people say I treated it so fast. I didn't really treat it. I just got rid of all the things they were doing to make it worse. And now they didn't feel any pain in 3 days. But it was nowhere near treated. And this unfortunately is the biggest problem I have with IBS cases. And some of you are my patients, you know what I'm talking about when I tell you this, that people think they're done before they're done. And that's why I say there's 3 stages. 1, just manage it. 2, so you don't have the pain and the diarrhea, which makes people think they're done when they're not. And then the next longest stage is to heal the intestinal lining. And so we have different herbs for the beginning, and we have different herbs for the healing stage. And some people never get past the first stage because they're saying, how come I still have this? And I go, well, you didn't change the diet enough, so I haven't been able to move you to the second stage. But in their minds, it's so much better than it was before, but they don't realize there's another stage. A lot of times people will do the appointment. I tell them all the foods not to eat, give them some initial herbs to just kind of like get it under control, and then they disappear. They don't even come for the next stage. I'd say at least 30% of people, and they're even happy. They even give me the testimonial. Thank you very much. I have no diarrhea. I have no pain. And they may even keep ordering like the diarrhea formula or the IBS formula, which I'm going to show you. But they really didn't get to the next stage. I mean, I've had multiple cases like this where they came back to me in a year, and I was like, what happened? You never finished. And they go, what do you mean never finished? It was much better, but it came back, right? Yeah, and never really went away. They just had to keep taking the diarrhea formula. I said, that's because you didn't go to the next stage, healing the intestinal lining. So because people weren't seeing the importance of these secondary stage of treatment, I even renamed the formulas for it healing gut tonics. And I have one for the Vata type and one for the Pitta type. So people got it in their head. This is the healing your intestinal lining formula, which I didn't give them in the beginning. And then they say, how come you didn't give me that in the beginning? Well, you had diarrhea and pain. I had to get rid of your diarrhea and pain first and just and get you to stop all these things that you were doing to make it worse. And that's why you felt better. But once you felt better and it was managed, which can happen quite quickly in a matter of weeks, I would say, some people say days, then you have to go for months in this healing process. So and then in this healing process, you can start to feel better right away too, and even start to be able to eat some of the so-called forbidden foods like, some spices and a little coffee and things like that, and not notice anything, but the healing isn't completely done. So the next problem I have is not just lose them in the beginning because they think they're done and they never go to the healing stage, but then when you start in the healing gut stage, they don't go long enough. They go a month and then they're back to the coffee, the chocolate, the hot spices, and the whole thing comes back, and we have to go back to step 1. Most people did this back to step 1 2 or 3 times. Even I warn them. Even I'm warning them right now in this video, and sometimes I will tell people to watch these webinars because I know the warning on IBS is in these webinars that I'm giving on this subject. And I have given this webinar before on IBS and ulcerative colitis. And I always give this warning, and I mention it to all new patients, but it's something about human nature. They forget me real fast when they don't have the pain and bleeding and they don't finish the treatment. And then the third stage, of course, is you have to know what foods you can't do for the rest of your life so it doesn't come back. But most people just skip that stage and jump back on some of these foods. So I've had, in my long 27-year career, I've had multiple cases come back after 4 or 5 years, but that's because they didn't let me do the last appointment to tell them which foods they should avoid forever. So we also have to understand that this condition has a digestive element. You still have to improve the digestion. And that's why we will always see that I will add some digestive herbs to this condition. So we kind of went over the diet there. Let me talk about the different herbs that are necessary. And I want to start with digestive herbs. And we have this one right here. This is all on Urban Teas, our sponsor. Every product I show you is here on urbanteas.com. So here's a tea. We call it gentle digestive tea. But you can see right here in the notes for sensitive digestive conditions like IBS. Because what happens with this person is they just become sensitive to everything. And that's their big, leads them to making the big mistake of just not eating much. And then they get weaker and weaker, but they're not treating it. And some people have, learned, okay, coffee, I can't do coffee. I can't do hot spices. I can't do raw foods. They may even figure out I need more fat in my diet. So a lot of people over a couple of years, trial and error, a lot of suffering, they realize they can't eat all these foods, but they haven't reversed the condition. They haven't treated it. And then so they stay in this limbo state for even a decade. And then they come to me and I could take care of it in a month or two. But these type of people, this is the formula I give them. And you can see it's very mild. You don't even no ginger in here. So when you're this sensitive, even ginger doesn't work. The two best herbs really are the fennel and coriander. Even just fennel tea all by itself is very gentle. Now, I think fennel is one of the major herbs in here, and not cumin, because I made this formula, and we can actually see it broken down here. And we can see that there is not that much cumin. And we also says dandelion root. I believe that really is dandelion leaf. But anyway, look what we're using it for. Leaky gut, because leaky gut isn't a medical term, but a lot of people, they become hypersensitive to all these foods. Leaky gut's like a pre-IBS condition. You can see I listed them off. Leaky gut, which is really it's not got inflamed yet. It's just sensitive. And it's a digestive problem. See, it says reduces gas and bloating for very sensitive types. So leaky gut, IBS, and ulcerative colitis. And you sip this tea with meals. Okay, so usually I'll give that. Now, I have many other digestive choices here that I could provide. I have this food allergy formula. Sometimes I use that one. I've got this one here, these other formulas for gas and bloating. And there's another formula called abdominal pain formula. And often I use that for severe cases. And even this acidity formula, I will also use. And sometimes I'll use this formula here, this anti-inflammatory formula. We call it acid belly tea. But if you read it, it says abdominal pain and inflammation. So if the person's got heartburn, and this tea is really anti-inflammatory, very soothing. You can see the fennel in there again, the demulcent herbs, marshmallow root, that's coating the lining. So this will bring, if the person has acid reflux and heartburn, that's a cat's claw there. It's a coriander seed. That's chamomile. That's fennel seeds. So this is very soothing, anti-inflammatory. Sometimes I'll use this one. I mean, if they have heartburn. So I have many choices of what I could give people. And like I said, there is one called abdominal pain formula too that I often use. So I will always give a digestive aid depending on the state of the digestion. And then the next one, which is really I made for IBS, we call it soothing gut tea. Great reviews on this one. This one, even I've sold it online for people who weren't even my patients, and they said, "Oh my God, I'm drinking your soothing gut tea all day, and my IBS symptoms are gone." Now, they didn't do an appointment. They're probably still eating wrong. They're not treating it. They're not healing it, but it's so effective that people think they've healed themselves from just this tea. But this one doesn't go with the meals. This goes in between the meals, and this is building up the intestinal mucosa, the main goal you're doing. So you change the diet, give them a digestive herb, and start telling them to have this demulcent. See, these are all 4 demulcent herbs, protecting the stomach lining, building up the intestinal mucus, used for even stomach ulcers and inflammatory colon conditions. So perfect. Marshmallow root and slippery elm, they're the 2 main ones right there. They're slimy. You see in those no green vegetables, and comfrey root in there too is known to heal the tissue, heal the sores, and licorice root is anti-inflammatory and also demulcent. But what all these have in common is they're slimy demulcents, particularly slippery elm. So when you drink it, you can even feel your whole mouth is a little slimy. Just after drinking a cup, you can feel it inside of your mouth. Even if you have a mouth ulcer, this one feels better. So you can see how fast I can treat this condition. It's like a day's job to me. When I change your diet, give you a little digestive aid here, this little anti-inflammatory tea to sip with meals. Then I give you soothing gut tea to have, between the meals. It starts coating the intestinal lining, and this is a true prebiotic. So often I tell the person you can take your probiotics with this tea. Very, very effective. So now they're already feeling better, just getting rid of all their bad habits that were creating it, like coffee, sour foods, vinegar. This all make it worse. Pickles, fermented sauerkraut makes it. Sauerkraut's one of the worst things for IBS, and people do it. It's a few reasons it's not good. One, it's the cabbage family, which we remove. Like I said, we always remove the cabbage family and the nightshades, and you get kind of a soft, warm, mushy type of meals. And that really has to be individualized for each person. So I'm not going to go into great details on it. But you're giving them this soft, mild, mushy food. If you have diarrhea, I even give them white rice, which really stops the diarrhea quite fast. There's many tricks to stopping diarrhea. And then, we're changing the diet. We're giving some digestive aid. Then we give the soothing gut, and already they're feeling better. They think they're cured. But in fact, there is a formula, an ancient Ayurvedic formula called Dadimastika, which is made, which I call IBS formula. But if you look at the ingredients and you're an Ayurvedic doctor, you can see it's Dadimastika. That's 10 herbs and even has a little cane sugar in it. So, sweet taste cane sugar, coconut water, all make this condition better, sweet and cooling foods. And it has the secret ingredient in Dadimastika is pomegranate skin, which, if you're like me and you know what foods do, pomegranate is very astringent. And we give pomegranate juice for loose stools, and we get the skin. You can get the skin of a pomegranate, and you can just grate it and make a cup of tea, and it will stop diarrhea right away. So we give this Dadimastika. It really improves the digestion and helps with the IBS real fast, and helps with absorption because there's Dadimastika actually has a little bit of some warm foods. It's very tasty. You can just eat it because it's got cane sugar in it. It's got the flavor of pomegranate, and it's got some mild spices like ajwain and cumin and fennel and coriander, very similar to the tea. So it's got the digestive herbs in there. It's got the astringent herbs for the loose stool and the diarrhea. It's got the soothing herbs in it that are very sweet and cooling. And this is very effective. Katuj is another herb used for diarrhea, inflammation in the colon. So I think there is katuj in Dadimastika. I think it's one of the 10 herbs. I know bilva is one, which we use for diarrhea. I think katuj is in there. So I just put an extra katuj, basically. And shank basma, this is we use for acid reflux and heartburn and abdominal pain, and it's not in Dadimastika. So I added that. So, from an Ayurvedic doctor's point of view, this is Dadimastika plus improved. Very, very effective, but not needed for all cases. You have to know what you're doing. You just can't grab this. Like if a person has a really strong appetite, they're really hungry, I don't usually need to give this. I usually give it when there's no appetite and there's really a malabsorption problem. And usually they don't need this for too long. Now, so there we've treated, this is really a great formula. That's why I call IBS formula, even though I use it for, other conditions like leaky gut. And it says right here, I combine it with soothing gut tea, gentle digestive tea, and healing gut formula. So let me go on here. Next, we have diarrhea formula. And if they're having diarrhea, we give them this at night. So now you're starting to get the whole treatment. And there's that katuj again. Katuj is the second ingredient. The first ingredient is bilva. Bilva is, known for, stopping diarrhea. You could just take bilva all by itself. And look, there's some Dadimastika in it. And then there's Kamaduta, which is another formula. So this is like formulas in formulas. Plus Basma is a very advanced formula, but really works good. Dadimastika brings down the heat. So this is really for a Pitta person who's warm and hot. And Lajalut, this is the slimy herb we're going to talk about more. Arjuna is a astringent herb that helps with the diarrhea. And of course, the Shank Basma helps with the cramping and the pain. This is really a great formula. And again, it's kind of built around the Dadimastika. It's just I'm making it more for diarrhea, but it's still helping with absorption. So, we take it different ways. Here it says take before meals, but often we are just giving it at night. It depends on what other herbs I'm giving them. So if you have diarrhea, you're going to get that. And then if you're just having loose stools, which is often the case, there's a whole formula just for that, for loose stools. And you're going to see some of the same herbs again here. There's the fennel I talked about, the licorice I talked about, kumari, which is actually aloe vera. So that helps. It's a mild laxative and it helps heal the colon. So, and this is some other herbs. This is just a kind of for loose stools and inflammation in the stool. It says for intestinal inflammation. So that's exactly what you have. So you're either going to get the diarrhea formula or this formula, one or the two, and a couple digestive formulas, teas. And now I have a big choice between the healing gut formula Vata, which, is for IBS and leaky gut, but no diarrhea, usually alternating constipation. And then the Pitta one where, you're having severe inflammation, even ulcerative colitis with lots of diarrhea. Now, of course, these herbs are there's the bilva again, and the katuja, that's another name for katuj. Lajalut is the slimy one. Licorice is this also soothing. Fennel. You can see some repeating here, but Lajalut, this is a very special herb in English herbalism. It's called the don't touch me not flower. And when you go near it, the petals close. And I remember a long time ago that my teacher in India was growing this in his yard, and he just loved this plant. I mean, he was just showing all his students, look, you just get close to it, it closes. It's so sensitive. So it's so sensitive, you don't even have to touch it. You just get your finger near in the the petals close. Well, that's the slimy one. That's really kind of almost the secret ingredient. It even says here, note this formula is high in demulcent healing herbs, are basically slimy. So mix with water, stir quickly, and shoot it down fast. It will not work in capsules. It has to be taken in this slimy form and slide down your intestines. And you may have to take one of these two formulas for up to a couple months before the condition is completely healed and you're able to go back to having spicy food and coffee again. So I hope that gave you an idea. Many conditions, I try to explain them on these webinars as best I can, so many people can just treat the condition at home on their own. But in this case, if you're particularly an advanced case, you're already having the loose stool and the pain, or you're already on a steroid, or you're having to take antibiotics and the condition is not getting better, then I don't recommend that you try to treat it at home. Because a lot of times I will start with one of these formulas, and then as the condition gets better, I can customize it. See, I can change these formulas, and I know all of those herbs. So if the person says, hey, I'm not getting loose stools, but I'm still getting abdominal pain, then I can change the formula to just help with the pain and the inflammation and not worry about the loose stools. So I can tweak the formula, and many of these patients end up on custom formulas. And when they reorder, they want to make sure they got their custom formula that was just suitable for them. And again, there's other variations. A lot of cases I get are Vata Pitta or Pitta Vata type, which is kind of a combination of the two. And sometimes that leaves me no choice but to make a custom formula. So this is not the kind of condition you're going to be able to treat without the herbs. The diet, restricting the diet, getting rid of the raw foods, the hot spices, adding more fat, getting rid of the coffee, the chocolate, the nightshades, and the cabbage family is not going to reverse your condition. You may feel better, but it doesn't have the reversal capacity. It's just you're not aggravating it anymore. So that's why the diet has to change, and then the herbs do the healing. The diet has to change, the digestion has to improve, and then the herbs need to run for a few months to heal the intestinal lining. And you got to stick it out until you've actually healed, until you stop. Otherwise, you can drag on the treatment for months and months and months and months. And many people do that until they realize that they've got to be more strict and rather get it over with. I could technically treat even a bad case in just a couple months, but most drag out to 6 months, even longer, because they don't stick to it. They think they're done, or they don't do a follow-up or allowing me to change the diet and change the formula. So those are the obstacles I face in treating people for irritable bowel and irritable bowel disease and ulcerative colitis, all these inflammatory colon conditions. Once you've treated dozens of clients, it's not that I don't have the ability to treat it. I'm mostly concerned about the patient, if they're going to be compliant or not. So be prepared to be compliant, be prepared to cook your own food, and be prepared to do the treatment for a few months. But that's a lot better than having intestinal and pain for a decade. And many of my clients have had the condition more than 10 years before they come to me. So I hope that gives you hope. And I hope you let those who have the condition know that there is a treatment. Get off of social media, first of all, and get treatment from a good Ayurvedic doctor who has a history of treating it, because everything I've shown you is based on Ayurvedic principles and Ayurvedic herbs, with a little bit of Western herbs there I threw in for the digestive teas. But mostly this is Ayurvedic herbs, and requires custom formulas and requires a custom diet, and ongoing follow-ups to change the diet and change the herbs as the person's getting done. Okay, once again, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I hope this educated you to know that these inflammatory colon conditions are fully treatable, and at least you know what to avoid if you're in the early stages to not make the condition worse. God bless you all, and I wish you the best of health and happiness.